Hi there, I'm Rob, the writer and producer of the High Desert Podcast and Strategic Outreach Coordinator at the Santa Fe Animal Shelter. Hey, can I ask you a favor? Share this with everyone you know. Unlike most podcasts, this one supports so much more than just the program itself. We want to use it as a way of increasing awareness and raise funds for our organization, a 501c3 nonprofit and the only animal shelter in Santa Fe. We do not receive public funding and rely on help from donors to save the nearly 20,000 animals that we serve every year. Please consider donating or, short of that, telling people about this project. With enough listeners, we can get the High Desert Podcast sponsored. That way you can save lives just by listening. If you have questions or an idea for a story, please do not hesitate to contact us directly at podcast@sfhumanesociety.org. That's PAWEDCAST at sfhumanesociety.org. Enjoy the show.
You've had a pet escape, right? It happens to the best of us. One moment you're sitting at your friend's house watching Love Actually for the 11th time, or at your desk hiding solitaire under an Excel spreadsheet and the phone rings. What could it be? 2-for-1 taco day? Did Beyonce just drop a new album without telling anyone again? No, it's something much more dire. It's your relative or partner saying Fido got out. He's chasing a Buick down Elm Street as we speak and having the time of his life. Mobilize everyone you know, call the National Guard, get choppers in the air. It may be the worst feeling that anyone has ever experienced, and it happened to Rebecca Garcia just a few weeks ago.
When I got home, my gate was closed, and I always look for him in his sleeping spot, and I didn't see him. Of course, it was dark, I didn't see him, so I got the flashlight out, and immediately I knew. He wasn't in his 3 spots, and I thought he's gone. He's escaped.
He was found wandering around downtown Santa Fe near the road. Passers-by were worried he might get hit by a car, so they called animal control to investigate the situation. Everyone figured curiosity probably got the better of him, and he dug under the fence in the yard, a totally routine occurrence we see all the time here at the shelter. He was brought into the shelter, but had no tags nor a microchip, and so could not be readily identified. This temporary resident wasn't a dog or a cat, nor was it a pet rabbit, which are found stray from time to time. This stray was a 60-pound African tortoise. Yes, you heard that right, a stray tortoise. There's a reason why some folks describe this kind of tortoise as prehistoric.
He looks like something from Journey to the Center of the Earth.
He looks like a dinosaur.
His skin has differing size scales, with large spurs on the front of his legs. His head is about the size of a fist with a prominent brow, and a mouth that has interlocking ridges. The shell is made up of hexagonal sections that fit together perfectly and look like they were hand-carved cross-sections of oddly shaped old trees, complete with rings that indicate his age. Tortoises like these do well in the high desert environment of northern New Mexico. There are native species of tortoise to the region too, but concerned pedestrians were right to call animal control when they saw an exotic reptile the size of a compact car engine roaming around a residential neighborhood. It's certainly not a regular occurrence. Animal control brought the big guy to the shelter that evening, where we have an enclosure for these kinds of more unusual residents. I went to visit him the morning after he came in. He came right over to investigate after finishing a small salad that had been left for him. We've had exotic pets come to the shelter before, tropical birds, snakes, lizards, ferrets, but most of these were surrendered. A stray tortoise is something you just cannot make up. As is the case with any animal that comes in stray, the Santa Fe Animal Shelter's admission staff worked diligently to find the tortoise's owner. With a cat or dog, there's a definitive starting point to this process. We check the animal for any tags and then scan them for a microchip. But how does one find the owner of a tortoise with no identifying characteristics? Was he abandoned? Did he escape from an exotic pet store? We sat down with the Santa Fe Animal Shelter's Director of Adoptions to talk about how exotics end up here.
So the tortoise we received recently is not the first exotic we've gotten in. In my time here, which is about 6 years, there's been a steady increase in exotics. And as I've progressed here, the number of exotics and the variety of exotics keeps increasing. A lot of people view cats and dogs as kind of the primary pet, but have a lifestyle that doesn't support it. I work weird hours, I can't walk my dog, my landlord won't let me have a cat. And there is a perception that exotics are an easy way around some of the limitations of housing. I get a tank and I can put a snake in it, and the snake doesn't go anywhere except for the tank, except when I pick the snake up and play with it, which encourages a lot of people to pick up exotics.
Luckily, people like Dylan and other leaders here at the Santa Fe Animal Shelter thought it appropriate to adapt our protocols and facilities to account for such a resident. We were even able to house some significantly larger, more dangerous occupants for a short time.
So one of the first real strange cases that I came across was a couple of alligators that were seized by animal control and brought in. And gosh, what do you do with a couple of alligators? From nose to tail, they were probably about as long as I am tall.
Gosh is right. Just so we're all on the same page here, I refer to Dylan as Viking-sized around the office. Luckily, we are specially suited for having these animals due to recent improvements we made.
A lot of smaller shelters just say, no, we can't do it, and most private shelters won't take them in. They're just not set up for it. It requires unique staff knowledge and facilities that don't exist everywhere. We were pretty lucky in terms of having a space we could essentially carve out for exotics in the last year and give them their own room. Not many shelters are able to do that.
To many, these animals are just as much family members as dogs and cats. The fact is, we are the only animal shelter in Santa Fe and for most of the surrounding area. Chances are, if one of these animals gets lost in northern New Mexico, it's not going to find a comfortable place to stay until it can find a new family. For a tortoise, that would be a very long life, cut far too short. Finally, a break in the case. Animal control made contact with the owner less than 24 hours after the tortoise was brought in.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Garcia.
Fittingly, his name is Tank. She came right down to get him once she received the call. I met her in the lobby of our admissions building. She could not have been more sincere in her gratitude.
Everyone was so nice, and I think because they do deal probably mostly with cats and dogs, it was a fascination for them, and they were real happy to have him. Everyone gathered around him, and I was real happy as well. They were excellent in keeping him for us overnight.
Rebecca clearly loves this animal. It sat contently on her lap the entire time we spoke to her. Tank was relatively friendly here at the shelter, but he definitely seems more comfortable in her arms. She mentions that she acquired the tortoise after her husband passed away.
My late husband was a big fan of animals and reptiles. His dad's a veterinarian.
He loved animals, and Tank is a beautiful memento. She strokes his leg and chin as she tells us more about the day he got lost.
When I got home, my gate was closed, and I always look for him in his sleeping spot, and there was no obvious spots that he dug out of that someone had possibly come in the yard and left the gate open.
Animal sheltering does usually revolve around cats and dogs. They are the most common pets around the world and the ones that many consider to be the most emotionally engaging. But it's just not the same for some folks. Growing up, I had a series of tropical and desert lizards that I favored over most kinds of furry pets. Dylan explains a bit more how these animals are extra special to the people who love them.
What you find, what I found when I got my first snake when I was 18, is that they're fun. They're fun to play with. You can pick them up, you can play with your friends with them, and you can hang out with them, and they live forever. My snake was over 29 years old when she finally passed this year. So that's a snake that's been in my life longer than anybody else I've known, which is pretty fun. And you also have things like my dad got me this turtle when I was a little kid, and now I'm a grown-up, and because turtles live so long, I've had this turtle my entire life.
That's amazing when you really think about it. It changes the whole dynamic of having a pet. Much of any dog or cat lover's anxiety about owning pets stems from the fact that they'll have to see this member of their family die someday. I always make the morbid joke to my family that they better hope I go before my first dog does. It will probably be much easier on them. Folks who own reptiles, especially tortoises like Tank, don't have that problem. So, we are left with a very happy ending and the knowledge that it is possible to have a real bond with these animals. Whereas relationships with most pets are bittersweet because of our longevity and their relatively short lifespans, that's not the case here, or for many exotic pet owners. Rebecca was eager to talk about Tank's potential to live a long life.
When we first got him, he was tiny. He was smaller than the palm of my hand. And little did I know that he was going to grow to be about 800 pounds, live over 100 years old.
There's some security in that, I imagine. At only 12 years old, Tank has already outlived one of his guardians, Rebecca's husband. He will probably outlive Rebecca as well. She explains that she would like her son to take care of him at some point. Tank will be a fixture in many generations of this family. That's so unusual for a pet to remain a constant as people come and go. Imagine having an animal companion that knew your long-past grandparent. Not some heirloom jewelry or a faded Kodachrome photo, but a live animal passed down from parent to child. We may never know how Tank got out. Maybe it was a plan 12 years in the making, thwarted by a good Samaritan. One thing is for sure, he surely did not escape because he wasn't getting enough love. For the next many decades at least, Tank will have the affection of Rebecca and her young son. The shelter, which itself has been around for some 80 years, will hopefully still be there for him if he decides to break out again. Regardless, we wish you the best, big guy. Give my regards to my great-grandchildren for me.
Thank you so much, podcast patrons. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the High Desert Podcast. If you have any questions, please submit them to podcast@sfhumanesociety.org, and remember to donate at our website, sfhumanesociety.org, or on our Patreon page. Only you can help us keep these animals and this show alive.